Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine for a moment a turn-of-the-century world. You've got science, showmanship, self-help, all kind of colliding. Today, we're doing a deep dive into this really extraordinary 1896 pamphlet. It's by a guy who, well, he boldly called himself a master of hypnotism, Santanelli. His work, What Hypnosis Really Is, it's this amazing blend. You've got medical theory, sure, but also stage spectacle, and this incredibly ambitious vision for the human mind. So our mission today, let's try and cut through the performance, get to the core of what Santanelli actually understood about hypnotism, about suggestion, and what he believed about our minds well over a century ago.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here isn't just like the historical curiosity of it all. It's how many of these foundational ideas, even though they're framed so differently back then, you can still hear echoes of them today, in discussions about the subconscious influence, that sort of thing. It really makes you ask, doesn't it? How much of what we think we know about, say, free will or control maybe has roots in ideas like these, ideas from way back then?
And Santanelli, wow, he was not shy about his ideas, was he? So confident. He actually claimed that, get this, 97% of sane people, if they were willing, could be hypnotized.
97%.
Yeah, and that all functional disorders. So think things like migraines, anxieties, stuff where they couldn't find a clear physical cause back then.
Right, the kind of things that puzzled doctors.
Exactly. He claimed they'd all be cured through suggestion within just 5 years of him writing this pamphlet.
5 years. That's incredibly audacious for the time. Just stunning confidence in his method.
He definitely wasn't just some quiet academic scribbling notes, eh? I mean, his pamphlet practically bursts with pride. It advertises his triumphal engagements. Herald Square Theater, Hammerstein's Olympia in New York.
Big venues.
Huge. And he says he first puzzled, then completely won the endorsement of the most eminent metropolitan physicians.
The newspapers, they apparently loved him. Called him a wonder, said Svengali is outdone. So what does this tell us about his whole approach, how he saw himself? Well, it's fascinating how he positioned himself, isn't it? If you look at the bigger picture, he clearly saw himself as pioneering a kind of scientific art. He believed that mental scientists, who he kind of dismissively notes as yet have no science, would eventually have to fold their ideas into the scientific workings of hypnotism.
So he saw hypnotism as the real science of the mind.
Pretty much. It was this grand vision, mind over matter as a genuine curative power. He was trying to prove that the mind controls matter, even pointing out how traditional science seemed to have, no real use or understanding for the sympathetic nervous system in this context.
And his public shows, they sound like quite the event. He'd start with a short explanation, right? Interesting. Used blackboard drawings, then moved into an instructive entertainment.
Instructive entertainment. I like that framing.
Yeah. And he promised he wouldn't humiliate anyone. He specifically wanted bright-minded ladies and gentlemen for this exhibition of statuary thing he did. Yeah, something he said would be exceedingly pleasing for everyone involved. Because, and this is key, he felt a hypnotist cannot put a thought in the mind. He can only bring out and intensify what is there.
So he needed intelligent, engaged participants.
Exactly. To really showcase his art effectively. It wasn't about making people cluck like chickens, apparently.
That no new thoughts rule. It's actually incredibly significant, isn't it? It really shapes his whole philosophy here. It suggests hypnotism isn't about manipulation, not in the way most people still kind of imagine it. It's more about accessing and amplifying what's already inside you.
Like turning up the volume on existing thoughts.
Precisely. It shifts the focus away from, external control and towards activating something internal, bringing a pre-existing mental landscape out into the open.
Okay, but to really get Santanelli's world, we have to tackle the absolute cornerstone of his thinking, this idea of suggestion. And he makes a truly staggering claim. I should quote him directly here. Man is not a free agent. His every act and thought is entirely controlled by suggestion.
Wow. Entirely controlled.
Entirely. That's a massive statement. Like we're all just puppets dancing on the strings of these unconscious hints.
And his theory for how this works revolves around this, pretty unique physiological model for his time. He posits two different brain systems. First, there's what he calls the abdominal brain. Now, anatomists back then knew this as the sympathetic nervous system, the network mostly controlling involuntary stuff like digestion, heart rate.
Stuff we don't consciously think about.
Right. But Santanelli claims they know no use for it beyond just vague descriptions. For him, this abdominal brain, which he centered behind the stomach, was way more important. It was the direct controller of all our mechanical actions and, crucially, the seat of all functional diseases.
So not the organs themselves causing the problem.
No, he argued it wasn't the organ, but an irritation or a disarrangement of the intelligence controlling that organ located in this abdominal brain. Then, up in your head, you've got the memory brain, the cerebral brain, which he saw as basically just a storage device, a receptacle for memories.
Okay, so you've laid out this model abdominal brain running the show mechanically, head brain storing memories. Sounds pretty radical. How did he make this, understandable for people? I know he used an analogy. The phonograph, was it?
Exactly. A brilliant analogy for the time. He compares the wax cylinder, the part that records the sound waves, that's your cerebral brain, storing memories, impressions,
Okay.
the mechanical part of the phonograph, the machinery that actually plays the sound. That, he says, is your abdominal brain. So think about it. If you play a blank cylinder, you get no sound, right? No memories recorded.
It's like sense.
But if you play a cylinder that has impressions on it, but you still get no sound, the problem isn't the wax, is it? It's the mechanical part. The player itself is faulty.
I see where he's going.
Right. He applies this directly to insanity. He argues that unless there's an obvious physical lesion in the head, the trouble doesn't lie in the cerebral memory brain. It lies in the mechanical arrangement, the abdominal brain of the person. It's a really fascinating anatomical theory, completely superseded now, of course, but it totally shaped his understanding. He even had this thought experiment. Imagine a child isolated for 21 years. They'd have an adult body, sure, but mentally, still an infant because no impressions have been made on the wax cylinder of their memory.
And it's this whole idea of impressions, or the lack of them, that seems to run through everything for Santanelli. Even how he reinterprets really basic things like reflex actions.
Precisely. Doctors back then would just say, a baby drops a hot cup because of reflex. Simple. But Santanelli observed something different. He says a baby first grasps the hot cup tighter. Only later do they learn to let go after being, in his words, taught to do so, basically associating withdrawal with the unpleasant feeling.
So learning, not just reflex.
Kind of a pre-programmed learning, yes. He connects this to hypnotic anesthesia, too. He thought tissue contraction could protect nerve endings, stop pain signals from reaching the brain nature's way, he called it, of stopping this communication. It's a very different perspective on automatic responses, suggesting this hidden layer of intelligence and learning.
Which brings us back to his definition of suggestion. It seems really important for understanding everything else he talks about.
Absolutely central. He defines it as a hint which unconsciously arouses and puts into operation a thought or series of thoughts, an action or series of actions.
Unconsciously arouses. That's the key bit, isn't it?
Right.
The hint slips past your conscious mind.
Exactly. It triggers something automatically based on your internal setup.
Okay, so if suggestion is the initial hint, then associated ideas are like the whole network connected to that hint.
That's a great way to put it. Santanelli argues that around every single idea you have, there's this cluster, this web of associated ideas. How big that web is depends on your experience, your education, everything that makes you you. And once these associations are formed, they become like part of that main thought, almost like the background scenery to the main subject in a picture.
And he gave examples of this, right? To make it more concrete. Even talking about subbrains.
He did. He offers some really compelling examples. He suggests the ganglion of a limb, basically a nerve cluster, can engrave the associated idea of withdrawal, allowing the limb to act without involving the main cerebral brain. He even points to the classic experiment with a decapitated frog. You irritate its leg and it still tries to pull away. It performs normal action, he calls it. Doctors just said reflex. But Santanelli saw it as the limb's own localized brain at work, acting independently based on its ingrained associations. He even cites the increased gray matter found in the fingertips of blind people as proof that these sort of subbrains can actually enlarge with constant use. It's kind of hinting at neuroplasticity long before we had that term.
And to show how different these webs of association are from person to person, he used that amazing dinner example.
Ah, yes, the dinner example. It's very vivid.
Super vivid. He paints this picture of what dinner means to four totally different people. You've got a king.
Right. For the king, dinner suggests a huge banquet, liveried servants, fancy wines, maybe even gout.
Then there's a merchant. For him, dinner means, what? A loving wife, happy kids, modest food, a peaceful evening.
A very different set of associations. than the laborer.
Yeah, his dinner is coarse food, maybe a dirty family environment, a quarrel, and then the desire to escape to the saloon.
And finally, the beggar.
For the beggar, dinner is just maybe a scowling housewife at a back door, some cold scraps. The core idea at dinner is the same, but the associated ideas surrounding it are completely different.
And those different associations lead to vastly different suggestions for what happens next or how they feel about dinner. It really shows how our internal reality is just built from our unique experiences.
Totally. Makes you wonder what Santanelli would have made of my dinner last night, which was mostly me staring blankly at the fridge, wondering what takeaway to order.
Well, the associated ideas might be indecision, convenience, slight guilt.
Probably. Yeah. And he claimed this whole mechanism, these associated ideas, actually controls all conversation.
Yeah, he gives this example of three businessmen talking. Their conversation just flows naturally, he says, from divorce to maybe horse racing, then to embezzlement. Why? Because each topic was suggested by an associated idea that was unconsciously triggered by the previous topic.
A chain reaction.
Exactly. A chain reaction of internal associations bubbling up. He even uses the example of explaining a locomotive to someone, say, an indigenous person who's never seen one. You can't just describe it technically. You have to build associations they do understand. Like, it's a horse, but 20 times larger. It eats wood. Its breath came in clouds. You're building a new framework using their existing mental furniture.
It shows how much our minds just fill in the blanks based on what's already there. Communication relies on finding or building those shared associations.
Absolutely.
And he had some great examples of this working unconsciously in everyday life, too. The engineer feeling a bridge is unsafe.
Right. The engineer might just have this gut feeling, can't quite say why, Santanelli's explanation. The break in the bridge caused a tiny, subtle change in the sound it made compared to the usual perfect order sound. That subtle difference unconsciously suggested danger.
Or stumbling into a hole at night.
Yeah, you stumble, maybe fall. The next night you walk the same path, and you instinctively step over that spot, even if you weren't consciously thinking, watch out for the hole. Why? Because the surrounding objects, a fence post became unconsciously associated with the fall, triggering the suggestion to step over.
It's a pretty remarkable insight into intuition, really, long before modern psychology got there.
It is. He's describing unconscious processing in his own unique terms.
Okay, so how did Santanelli take all this theory, suggestion, associated ideas, the two brains, and apply it to the actual mechanics of hypnosis?
Well, for him, it really hinged on one core principle. The mind will hold but one idea at a time.
Just one.
Just one predominant idea at any given moment. He uses this great metaphor, the wheel and spokes. The mind is the hub of the wheel. Each spoke represents an idea, and the space between the spokes, that's a dead center. In normal life, the wheel is constantly revolving. New ideas, new spokes appear in the active spot. But in hypnosis, the predominant idea forced upon the subject is sleep.
But not real sleep.
No, crucially, it's transparent, like a blank spoke. He calls it a simulated sleep. You're not truly asleep like you are at night.
Okay, what's the difference then, according to him? Why is that distinction so important?
It's vital to his whole theory. In true sleep, he says, the mind is like a solid blank space. You can't arouse ideas there. It's offline. But in hypnosis, that simulated sleep state creates a kind of movable space in the mind's hub. And into that space, the operator, the hypnotist, can insert old ideas or fitted spokes.
Old ideas, meaning?
Meaning ideas the subject already has and accepts in their normal waking state. This loops right back to his earlier point. New ideas cannot be brought to the surface. The hypnotist can't put a genuinely new thought into your mind, but, he says, they can reverse or change any idea that the subject, when awake, either desires to change or is maybe just indifferent to. It's about rearranging the existing furniture, not bringing in new pieces.
Okay. That explains how he could hypnotize like 60 people at once on stage.
Yeah.
That always sounded like some kind of superpower.
Right. But he says, no, it's not supernatural power. Those 60 people, they essentially know how to go into hypnosis already. They're willing to accept suggestions, provided those suggestions aren't repulsive to their natures.
So he's just guiding them.
Exactly. They unconsciously be led, but not forced into hypnosis. He even compares himself to a swimming teacher, calling out instructions to people who already know the basics of swimming. The ability is latent. He just provides the trigger, the suggestion. It's basically self-induced, facilitated by him.
And once someone accepts a suggestion in this hypnotic state, how do they behave?
Well, they operate entirely under the influence of that one predominant thought, that suggested idea. But interestingly, their other senses remain normal, unless specifically targeted by another suggestion. So if he suggests someone is a public singer, they fully inhabit that role. They might feel free, confident, and if someone invites them to sing, even if it's the hypnotist, they'll likely accept and try their best.
They're living inside that suggested reality.
Completely. Or his other example, if he suggests someone is a fisherman standing by a stream, they won't see the audience or the theater stage anymore. That's irrelevant to the fisherman idea. But if someone else walks up pretending to have a fishing pole, they'll interact with that person because that fits into the associated picture of fishing. Their mind creates and edits reality based on the accepted suggestion and its related associations.
Oh, wow. Total immersion. And his way of waking people up was different too, wasn't it? Not just a gentle suggestion.
Yeah, quite distinctive. He noticed that unlike subjects of other hypnosis who might just gently wake up when told, his subjects often seemed disoriented, sometimes even fall over themselves upon awakening.
Why was that?
His theory was that during hypnosis, the brain became slightly anemic, reduced blood flow. So to wake them safely, reestablish normal circulation, and get that mental hub once more spinning properly, he believed they needed to be actively startled awake, not just gently suggested back to consciousness.
Okay, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Crime. You always hear those sensational stories about hypnotists making people do bad things. What does Santanelli say about that?
He pretty much dismisses those claims as foolish, pure sensationalism. He argues if he told someone under hypnosis to, say, commit murder, the very idea of murder would instantly trigger all its negative associated ideas in the subject's mind. You know, blood, death, disgrace, trial, conviction, punishment. And because those associations are already strongly ingrained as morally wrong, the subject would simply refuse the suggestion.
Because it clashes with their existing values.
Exactly. He hammers this point home again and again. He can put no thought in the mind that isn't already there and, crucially, isn't acceptable within the subject's own moral framework.
He also talks about the body's state during hypnosis, right? As a kind of safeguard.
Yes. He argues that during hypnosis, the body is relaxed, physically calm, it's free of the usual physiological congestions that he believed could arouse strong passions or negative emotions in waking life. So, if a suggestion for a criminal act were made, not only would the mental associations revolt, but the calm physical state would mean that all her moral associated ideas would be aroused and indignation would predominate. The whole system, mental and physical, resists something deeply immoral.
What about those stage experiments where people did seem to steal things or pretend to stab someone?
He addresses those directly. He says even when subjects steal small, valueless items on stage or stab someone with a paper dagger, they are perfectly conscious through his associated ideas that it's an experimental farce. They know it's pretend. He insists if you were to suggest something real, like stealing valuable diamonds from a jewelry store, a completely different series of associated ideas would be aroused. Fear, morality, consequences, and the subject refuse. His core belief remains. You cannot compel someone through hypnosis to act against their fundamental nature or deeply held moral beliefs.
Okay, moving from crime to another of his famous acts, the 7-day sleeper. This sounds incredible.
Oh, it was a sensation. This act apparently garnered national attention. People were baffled. They assumed he must be secretly feeding the boy who was asleep for a whole week. Stories about hidden sandwiches circulated.
So what was the real secret, according to Santanelli?
He reveals that the real marvel, the truly difficult part, wasn't managing hunger. He claimed the stomach simply contracted, suspending the desire for food quite easily through suggestion. The real challenge, the thing that took him 16 attempts and failures to figure out, was suspending thirst. He even got a hint from a student that finally cracked it. He noted the system must have water when it can do without everything else. Controlling thirst hypnotically was the true scientific feat for him.
And what was the scientific point he was trying to make with this extreme demonstration?
For Santanelli, the point was to prove definitively that basic bodily functions like hunger, thirst, even bowel action are not purely involuntary reflexes. He believed they're controlled by an intelligence, which is reached through hypnotic suggestion. Being able to suspend these functions for 7 days straight, apparently without harm or inconvenience to the subject, was his ultimate proof. He even talks about suspending kidney action once for 7 days.
Whoa, that sounds dangerous. Weren't doctors worried?
They were very skeptical, worried about uremic poisoning. So he apparently modified the experiment, allowed the kidneys to function normally, but continued suspending other functions, had the urine analyzed afterwards, and used the results to prove his claims on healthy people. His goal was to demonstrate beyond doubt that mind controls matter, and crucially, that no ill can come when the body's own intelligence responds appropriately to a suggestion. If it were harmful, he believed, then intelligence simply wouldn't act on the suggestion.
He also talks about dealing with alleged exposés, right? People
Yeah.
trying to debunk him.
Wait. Yes, he's quite candid about it. He mentions these hypnotic horses subjects who didn't hypnotize so many times they became extremely proficient. They could apparently reproduce some of the standard tests, like appearing insensitive to pain or suspending bodily functions for maybe 24 hours almost at will.
So they'd go to the newspapers.
Exactly. They'd go to the papers claiming, look, it wasn't hypnosis. I did this myself. I'm the real wonder. Trying to steal his thunder, basically. But Santanelli had an interesting take. He said while these exposés grabbed headlines and maybe caused temporary doubt, they ultimately benefited science. Why? Because the public, now skeptical and watching subsequent demonstrations with the eye of a hawk, would end up even more convinced of the genuineness of the claims of the hypnotist when they saw the real deal. It sparked wider interest, he thought.
Accidental marketing, in a way.
Kind of, turning lemons into lemonade, showing confidence in his methods even when challenged.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway? What's the lasting echo from Santanelli's really audacious 1896 vision?
Well, I think it's that profound, almost unsettling idea at its core. That suggestion isn't about planting totally new thoughts in someone's head. It's about activating, maybe intensifying what's already lying dormant inside us. He's describing this hidden internal control system, governed by suggestion and association, that has potentially astonishing power over our bodies, our perceptions, our actions.
And that really forces you to question things, doesn't it? Even today, how much real agency do we have?
Exactly. If Santanelli believed back in 1896 that man is not a free agent, his every act and thought is entirely controlled by suggestion, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our own daily lives, even right now, are we truly directing consciously? And how much is maybe just a complex chain reaction, associated ideas triggered by unconscious suggestions playing out moment by moment? What suggestions, maybe from our culture, our habits, our environment? What suggestions are you accepting and acting on without even realizing it today?